Sometimes you only need some simple guitar chords to make something really beautiful. In this video, I'll break down the sample you just heard, some beautiful, dark, ambient R&B, in the style of, I'd say, Brent Faiyaz, Avenoir, maybe a little bit of Frank Ocean. And yeah, as always, I'm gonna try to go into as much detail as possible, show you every single layer, all the effects and all the processing, and also explain my thought process behind everything. So let's not waste any time and get started. I started with my acoustic guitar and played in some very simple chords in like the most simple way possible. As always, you don't need any complex, complicated chords, because the simplicity is gonna make sure that the sample will turn out catchy and we'll be able to easily expand on the idea and add more elements to it. I used major 7 chords because I feel like they give this dreamy, nostalgic kind of feeling, and I played them like this. So honestly, the dry guitar already sounds pretty nice, but I wanted it to be really atmospheric. So for that I added some guitar rig on the water preset, some EQ to take out lows and highs, some reverb and delay, just a little bit of distortion to add a bit more presence to it, and then some more EQ to clean it up. For the first part of the sample, I only use these first 2 chords. That way, when the full progression comes in later, it feels like the sample is evolving over time. After that, I simply recorded the root notes of the chords and pitched them down an octave. I added another guitar layer, which I think turned out really beautiful. I only played the first chord again, the exact same way, but 1 octave higher to make it stand out. On that I added some guitar rig on the Creamy Snowflakes preset, which gives it that really big and ambient reverb tail, and I recorded that into my tape recorder. And when recording it back into FL Studio, I just slightly hit this rewind button, and that causes a very subtle like tape stop effect where the pitch slides down a bit, and that way I could give this very simple layer so much character and make it sound really beautiful. Then I wanted to add some more texture, and you can do that by playing around with all kinds of sounds and instruments, or even live ambient recordings, but I was lazy and just dragged in some textures that I've already made before. I used a very soft ambient percussion loop and a melodic texture which I just drowned out a little bit, made it pan from left to right, and reduced some annoying frequencies. If you also want sounds like these, you can check out my Lucid Weekly subscription, where I send you sample packs with textures like these and much more every single week. Link is in the description. To transition to the next section, I added this very simple atmospheric lead melody. So for the next section, I wanted to make a really big, deep and ambient soundscape, and I wanted to make a choir for that. And this is probably gonna be a very long part of the video, but I really want to show you how you can make your own choirs and vocals without being able to sing very well. So the first step is autotune. Autotune really helps me when I don't have a specific melody in mind yet, because I can just put it on my voice and play around a bit to see what might sound good. I also like to take one side of the headphones off my ears. That way when I don't hit a note, I hear it immediately, because I can really hear the dissonance between my actual voice on one ear and the tuned vocals on the other ear. But when recording, you have to make sure that you're recording the dry signal. You don't want any autotune on the actual recording, you just want it as orientation when singing. So whenever I've recorded my vocals, I usually don't even listen to them because I know they're gonna be ass. I just immediately bring them into new tone. You can also use Melodyne or any other pitch correction software. For these more organic vocals, I like to turn up the center a bit and turn the variation down a bit, but you really don't want to go too far because otherwise it will sound unnatural. I also like to stay away from the snap to scale function and just tune all the notes manually. You can also leave some like little transition notes out of the scale just to keep the natural sound. So just go through the recording and only edit the notes that really need editing. So yeah, that's my process for recording the vocals. For this sample, to record the vocals, I actually pitch the sample down 2 semitones, so that way I can pitch it up again later to make sure it doesn't really sound like me anymore. And also I felt like the lower pitch was better suited for my voice. In this sample I started with 2 layers for the lead vocals. I have one higher and one lower layer. I made sure to have the same kind of movement in them, so when one layer goes up in pitch, the other one does as well, but they are not the same notes, so they are harmonizing. After that I added some layers as like chords. For that I didn't even sing along with the sample, I just recorded some notes that I know are in the chords that I used. Of course sometimes I didn't immediately hit the right note, but I actually kept some of those recordings in to have like little vocal runs in the chords, but in reality they are just me trying to hit the right note. For another layer, I listened to all the recordings again and just picked some little slices that sounded cool. On that I added a little altar boy to pitch it up an octave and then bring the mix down to have like a higher layer on top of it. Then I actually added an Omnisphere choir. On their own these choirs sound very unnatural, but I'm turning the volume down very low so that you don't really hear it, but it just adds another layer of depth to the choir. And then I even added some splice vocals. The thing with splice vocals is that there's some really cool stuff, but like literally everyone has splice. And guess what? You're not the only one typing in vocals and then clicking on the R&B tag. So whenever you find some cool vocals, you can be sure that so many people have already used them. And for that reason, I don't really like just grabbing some random splice vocals. But for something like this, you can kind of bury them in the mix and add yet another layer of depth to the choir. So I use these vocals. I just used some small slices of this and added a little bit of reverb. So now that I had all these layers, I panned them all a bit differently to make it sound wider, and then I routed all of them to a new mixer track to make them really ambient. First we have this effect rack preset, which makes it sound a bit grittier and more vintage. Then some reverb, another effect rack with a simple delay preset, some EQ to take out lows and highs, a stereo enhancer to make it a bit wider, a bit of distortion to give it more presence, and then some more EQ to clean it up. And now after all this pain, and after pitching it up to the right key again, we have this. To enhance this big and heavy atmosphere, I replaced the bass sound with an atmospheric synth bass. For the transitions between the notes, I use slide notes. To me, slide notes just always give this really ethereal feeling, which I thought fit perfectly to the vibe. I also cut out the bass towards the end because, I don't know, it sounded cool. To finish this section, I added some melodic textures again. This time I actually played around with some analog lab presets and used effects like Portal. I recorded everything and then at the end just picked some slices that I liked. So whenever I have like these big, dense sections in my samples, I usually like to let the sample breathe a bit in the next section. And I mainly did that by adding some pauses to the main elements, the guitar and the bass. For the vocals on this part, I took out the Omnisphere layer just to make it sound a bit less heavy. And I also turned up the splice vocals a bit because they're directly in the pauses of the other instruments. And then to finish everything off, I added some good old reversed guitars. As always for this, I recorded some random riffs on my electric guitar, but for this I didn't record the dry guitar. I used some guitar rig on the acoustic multi preset and a little bit of distortion. That way when I reverse it, it has a bit more of a unique texture because I'm also reversing the effects on it. Then of course I just listened to the recording and picked the best parts. And for effects I just used my usual effect chain for these reversed guitars. A bandpass EQ, the goat, some delay and some reverb. And that's the full sample. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful and inspiring. From now on, I'm offering classes for you guys, so you can book a 1-hour call with me where I can teach you and we can talk about whatever you want. You can ask me any questions. I can break down samples, beats, or anything else for you. I can give you feedback to your own music, talk about equipment, give you tips for your beats or videos or your music career in general. And yeah, we can just hop on a call for an hour. If you're interested in that, I'll leave a link down in the description. And yeah, I really appreciate you and thanks for watching.